I saw a comment recently on one of my videos saying I'm obsessed with atheists. It's not an obsession, stop. So anyway, today we're going to be looking at an atheist video. Come on, it's the only thing I know how to do. Don't hate a fish for swimming. Anyway, so I've taken a look at this guy's content before. He talks really fast and like he's really angry. Have you ever met one of those people that talk so fast that every time you think that you have a counterpoint, they just bring up another point? And it kind of makes you think, huh, this guy's kind of smart. I can't refute a thing he's saying. But really all you gotta do is just break down what they're saying and it all kind of falls apart. Well, that's the story of today's video. He's gonna give 10 reasons why you should leave the Christian religion. Let's take it one by one and rank his arguments.
Here's 10 reasons you should leave the Christian religion, coming from a formerly devout Christian who wanted nothing more than to be a preacher with his life.
You can see what I mean about him being a little overbearing. My man can talk.
I wanted to go to seminary, but here are the 10 reasons I left the Christian religion. First and foremost, there is no independent verification or evidence to establish any of the supernatural claims within the Bible or in any way a reliable historic fact. I find this astonishing because there are countless, extraordinary, impossible to miss miracles that have no eyewitness testimonies or any historic record whatsoever.
Okay, you have to understand that saying you need evidence outside the Bible takes away most of the evidence. The Gospels were written by people who were eyewitness testimonies or people who communicated directly with them. That might sound like really weak evidence to you and I because everyone in our society writes, but you have to understand that it wasn't that way in Jesus' time. There's no real historical reason to believe that Socrates didn't exist or didn't teach the things that people wrote about. But the problem is that we actually don't have any writings of Socrates. We have writings from Plato and some of his other students talking about Socrates' life and his teachings. But if we're going to believe that Socrates existed and that he taught what his disciples said that he taught, then we have to believe the books that we're reading. Likewise, the Gospels were written by people who were actually there and saw the whole thing. And by the way, these guys didn't get super famous from their writings. They died brutal deaths after the fact.
We're going to tell the whole world that he rose from the dead.
Oh, you know I'm in.
I love it already.
All right, classic. Then what?
And then we're all going to get brutally murdered.
Why would they make this up only to get persecuted and eventually killed? The integrity of the Gospels is far more reliable using historical methods than Julius Caesar's Gallic Wars. 3 out of 10, weak argument.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
A second reason you should leave is because you are actively worshiping a child murderer that condoned rape and slavery before concerning himself with the salvation of mankind. When you believe in the Bible, essentially you're just believing Moses when he told everybody, hey everybody, I can talk to God, and this God is all-loving, all-powerful, all-good, and all-knowing, and his only desire is total human salvation. But despite this, first, God told me to tell y'all that we should condone rape, slavery, as well as enforce the death penalty for being gay, hitting a parent, cursing a parent, carrying sticks on the Sabbath, ignoring a priest, or not following God. In fact, entire civilizations, including their women and children, should die if they don't follow the one true God Yahweh out of the other 100,000 gods that other people have claimed to witness.
Okay, he's making a lot of claims here. Let's unpack it. I'm not going to sit here and address every single passage that he brought up because I don't have all day. That would take a video of its own. But the most common passage brought up, and one that he brought up, is about the Canaanites. The Canaanites were killed because they were practicing the worst child sacrifice system in history. I mean, think about it. If you knew someone who was sacrificing his children for rain, do you think that person deserves to live? John Lennox in an interview did a great job answering this question, so I want to defer to what he says.
This event is described in a book, not an obscure book of the Bible, but a book that defines the very morality with which we criticize it. That is very striking. That the reason given in Deuteronomy for that invasion of Canaan is moral. It's because of the extreme wickedness, and it involved some of the worst excesses of child sacrifice that the world has ever seen. All this business to kill them all, and it's repeated. And he points out that it's repeated so often that it must be an ancient formulaic. Now, if I said to you, all England came to the funeral of Princess Diana, well, some people were in bed with flu, you know, and but we know what it means, a substantial quantity. And Waltersdorf's conclusion, as one of the world's leading biblical scholars, is that what this means is score a decisive victory over. And the reason it's in one of the most moral books of the Old Testament is that the rules of war contained in that book were not actually broken. Because if you ask yourself the question, were all these cities wiped out? The answer is no, because they all reappear again, populated. So It wasn't carried out in the literalistic sense.
If you were supposedly a super devout Christian before, I would think you would know this argument. Still, it's pretty common. 4 out of 10.
I mean, it's alright.
The third reason you should leave the church is because of the infestation of child abuse. 300,000 Catholic children were abused in France and 222,000 children were abused in Spain alone. My former pastor, Robert Morris, was on Trump's spiritual advisory team, then he a 12-year-old girl, only served 6 months in jail, and now he lives in a lavish life.
I mean, yeah, there are a lot of bad people who claim to be Christian, but there are bad people in every belief system. Are you saying there are no bad atheists? Why would you want to be an atheist if this is your legacy? The Bible has very clear standards about how to handle immorality within a church. This is what church discipline is for. I wish that more churches followed that structure, but you can't blame Christianity on the fact that some Christians don't listen to the Bible. 1 out of 10, bad argument. Moving on.
Well, duh.
Fourth reason you should leave is because the vast majority of churches actually support the modern state of Israel. Call me crazy, but I don't think Jesus would be supporting the genocide of the Palestinian children, and come to think of it, wasn't Jesus actually against the Israeli government in his time?
Okay, putting all of his political points aside for a second, he's got a point. We have something here. The problem is that most churches have backed themselves into a theological corner. There's a biblical position called dispensationalism. It's relatively new, it's only about 200 years old. I would argue it's not what the Bible teaches at all. But if you're a dispensationalist, basically you believe that Israel is still the children of God, regardless of if they're Christians or not, and that the kingdom of heaven is going to come from them, and therefore they're worthy of our support.
Have you ever thought for 1 second as I close, have you ever thought that Israel is named Israel because God is real?
This is not what the Bible teaches. The Apostle Paul says that there's no distinction between Jew and Gentile. But because of this theological concept, the modern church has almost thrown that idea out. The church embraced bad theology here, 6 out of 10.
The fifth reason you should leave is because the definition of faith is indistinguishable from the definition of insanity, and this is something that is exploited by the ruling class. Christians hear the fact that there is no evidence for any of their supernatural claims, and then they say, well, it's just good to have faith. I disagree, and I think faith has led people to do some crazy shit.
This is just a fundamental misunderstanding of what faith is. Everyone has faith in things. I have faith in the chair that I'm sitting on right now that it's not going to collapse. Part of that is because I've sat in this chair before and it's never collapsed. And part of that is just because of basic reasoning. I have faith in my wife in part because she's never given me a reason to doubt her, and also in part because I love her. It's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. Faith isn't a belief with lack of evidence. 2 out of 10.
You sure about that? You sure about that?
The sixth reason you should leave Christianity is because there are tons of other religions, so why do you think that yours is automatically the right one, especially when there's no evidence whatsoever to separate itself from the other religions?
Just because there's a lot of people who are wrong doesn't mean no one's right. 0 out of 10. Worst one so far.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
The seventh reason that you should leave is because the theory of evolution has actual evidence to give it credibility. A very small amount of Christians actually accept evolution as part of the Christian theology. However, this disregards what the Bible objectively says happened during the creation of the universe.
The Bible isn't a science book. Some Christians really did Christianity a dirty by acting like you can't be a Christian and an evolutionist. Personally, I'm not even an evolutionist. But if someone came to me with irrefutable evidence today, proving 100% that evolution is true, that wouldn't shake my faith even a little bit. Because the Bible doesn't actually make any scientific claims. I'm gonna give this one a 3 out of 10 because it's mostly the church's fault.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
The eighth reason you should leave Christianity is because historically Christians used the Bible to justify slavery in America.
This is just not true. The bulk of the Bible actually had to be removed in order to justify slavery. This is a really nuanced conversation, and I want to make an entire video about slavery in the Bible. But one historical fact that's important to understand right out the gate is that the Bible that was used to justify slavery had 10% of the Old Testament in it, because there's so much in the Bible that's anti-slavery. The entire book of Exodus is dedicated to God freeing his people from slavery. And there are portions like in Galatians 3 where Paul says that there's no distinction between slave and free. 4 out of 10. It would have been stronger if there was more nuance in your argument.
I mean, it's alright.
The ninth reason you should leave is because America was founded upon the idea that we would separate our church and state because we were persecuted in England so much because they were shoving religion down the throats of everybody. But now it's mandatory for the Bible to be taught in classrooms across America.
The Founding Fathers were not saying that they wanted to keep religious conviction out of the government. The Pilgrims who left England left a place where the church literally had as much power as the king or queen. This meant that the church had the power to kill people based on how they interpreted the Bible. which you already pointed out in your video. But the founding fathers felt that no one deserved to die over denominational difference. So yeah, in America, there isn't a church that's right next to the government, both ruling powers. 0 out of 10. That may have been the worst one.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
The 10th and final reason that you should leave the church is because going to church would suggest giving 10% of all the income you would ever earn just so that you could have a bunch of answers about the universe that are a bunch of bullshit. See, in the Bible, there's something called a tithe offering in which you give 10% of all of your income to the church. The church doesn't force you, but essentially the church says that if you have true faith in God, then you would do this. Essentially putting a gun to your head saying you're gonna go to hell if you don't give me money. The amount of money that I would be making had I pursued a career as a preacher would be substantially more than what I make now. I really just make whatever TikTok pays me and whatever I make from phone calls from people who are concerned about their faith and are having an existential crisis.
I think it's so funny that this dude runs a business where he gives people spiritual advice and he's like yelling at the camera the whole time. I've never once been to a church that demanded money. The Bible commands Christians to give generously to the church, but doesn't define what that means. The Old Testament is where we get the 10% number, but that's actually never demanded from Christians. Most churches just say what the Bible says. Give generously. People have this strange idea that if you walk into church, you're gonna have people grab you by the collar and slam you up to the wall and say, give me 10% of your income. You're not gonna be charged for going to church. And if you are charged, go to a different church. He also charges people for a phone call. Never once have I had anyone charge me for a counseling session or a phone call or just a conversation about spirituality. 1 out of 10. Have a good day though.